Good afternoon. My name is Gary May. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and I'll be moderating this final panel of the day. The previous panel dealt with recruiting engineers from the employer's perspective primarily. This panel will differ a little bit in that we'll talk about how do we train, educate, and make aware the engineering talent at our institutions to be prepared for these career paths. Very well prepared, competent panel I have with me to share some of their thoughts about these issues. The format of our panel will be the same as the previous one, with one exception. At the conclusion of our panel, there'll be wine. So, so I'll ask the panelists to speak for less than or equal to 10 minutes. And the topics that I asked them to address are what sort of jobs are the engineering graduates finding, who's coming to recruit them at their institutions and in their organizations, how has that trend changed over time, is that trend calibrated well with the expectations of the students as well as perhaps their parents or other stakeholders. What are the career services institutions on the campuses and elsewhere doing to address these changes and needs? And finally, what impact has this changing set of opportunities had and choices had on the graduates and undergraduates and the education they're receiving by the universities, both the curricular and the co-curricular and extracurricular experiences at the universities? My panelists are Connie Pritchard, Constance, but she goes by Connie. She just told me that, of the Pritchard Group and the National Career Development Association. Dean Darryll Pines, the Farvardin Professor and Dean of the Clark School of Engineering at the University of Maryland. And finally, Michael McKenzie, who's the Managing Director of Career Learning and Experience, the Center of Career Services at George Washington University. Their bios are in your folder, so I won't give them a long introduction. I'll just let them dig right into the topic, and we'll start with Connie.
Okay. I'm coming to you from a different perspective than you've heard today. First of all, I have to confess, I am not an engineer, okay? I have a undergraduate degree in English and history, a master's in linguistics, and my doctorate is in education with a very large cognate in career services. I've been working in career services for 30 years in a number of different settings, including higher education. But the last 22 years, I've been working in my own business. So if I were going to self-identify, I would say I'm a business owner and a career coach. So that's just a little bit about me here. And I need a quick lesson. Gary said that I'm also representing the National Association, the National Career Development Association. This is the premier career association in our business. And I actually am the chair of the Career Development Facilitator Advisory Committee. Career Development Facilitator is a training program that began through NCDA probably about 15 years ago. And we train people in the career business. It's different than a graduate degree in that this training is designed for practitioners, whether they are working in what we call workforce, which would be our state organizations that help people who are transitioning through jobs, whether they're working in K through 12 or higher education, or also whether or not they are working in business and industry. So it basically is like a graduate course in career development. I called this Got a Minute School of Career Counseling because the problem we have is we have great, well-educated, and certainly well-meaning folks who are career coaches. But engaging people in this career process is the biggest challenge that we face. And let me begin by sharing this philosophy, if you will, about career coaching. It kind of states what we do. We talk a lot in our business about, yes, you're going to need to look for jobs, and yes, certain companies come on our campus or certain companies hire in this area, and this is what we look for. But if you talk to a career coach or a career practitioner, they will tell you that they want their clients to find work that has meaning to them. And that doesn't matter whether their clients are 50, 60, 70, or 20, or 15, or whatever. This is a theme that is very important to us. All right, so let me back you up a minute and just remind you that in our country, we have a huge personal identity with occupation. When we go to college, people say, so what's your major? That's an occupational decision, okay? Question. And work influences what you see up there. The people we hang out with, our earnings, our vacation, our social economic status. So it's very important in our country. Notice how it's changed. And one of the things that make all that you are trying to do so difficult is that while you're trying to assist people into getting into career paths and to assure that our country has the trained people that it needs, work is changing, just changing incredibly for us. And what work means to people is also changing. This is the career ethic that my father grew up under. My mother too, but my parents grew up under this one. What we know is that doesn't exist anymore. I have a career development facilitator student who works for General Motors, and she just moved in the past week from a contract position, which quite honestly is the point of entry for a lot of people in the field. It's not even getting hired on by the company, but you come in as a contractor, maybe for a year, maybe for 2 years, maybe for 3 years, and then finally you get hired on by the company. And she just moved into a real position at General Motors and as actually working in succession planning. And I was asking her how she felt about the position and those kinds of things, and she's a young woman of like 28. And she said, well, you know what, they just got rid of their pension. And it was interesting to me that a 28-year-old saw that as a loss. It's changing. So there's a new career philosophy that's not just young people, but it's those boomers, it's those Xers, it's a lot of Americans are looking for. They want fulfillment in their work. They want personal and professional growth, but they want to have a life in addition to that. And to top all that off is this quote from Thomas Friedman says, we're not competing just with the person next door anymore. We're competing with people all across the world in this. I put this slide in because there's a lot of confusion about what a career really is. Okay, so from a career perspective, this is what we would say a career is. It's not just our job, but it's those things that have gone on in our lives, and it's that total range of roles that we play in our life. In the career field, we work with people in this way. And notice that very important word there, it says lifelong. Okay? So this is going on because things are changing for us as we are moving through life in this. And notice what it's made up of. These things that we've already heard about, decision-making style, how we pull together those life roles, what matters to us, and how I see myself in this. One of our theorists that is super has said, well, you know what? People go through stages. Now, he did this 50 years ago, and we could very much say, well, those ages just don't work anymore. Okay, and that's true. But the stages are still very critical as we think about workers and as we think about ourselves. And don't get me wrong, maintenance there doesn't mean put the feet up on the desk and just kind of collect a paycheck, okay? It's a very different kind of concept there. We also know that these roles that we play in life, and you'll notice up there is worker, continue throughout our entire life and impact our career decisions and our occupational decisions. So what do we do as career practitioners with people? Well, we do these kinds of things. And you'll notice some of those kinds of things are what Diane and Jerry were talking about at the bottom there. Adjusting to choices after implementation, coping with job stress, okay? How can we be successful in this occupation that we have chosen? As career practitioners, we do this in a relationship with others. A lot of our services nowadays are actually delivered in groups, okay? We also do a tremendous amount of education about things in this. And it's all overlaid in a systematic development of career services. This is sort of a typical or ideal way of thinking about career services here. And I just want to point out a couple things to you. Grade 8, that middle school time, which is pretty young, is where important decisions are being made. Huge decisions are being made for young people, okay? So there's some points here where we need to be engaging people in learning about careers, not just those young people making those decisions, but their parents as well. All right, what do we know about Americans as I'm finishing up here? Most Americans have had very limited opportunities to engage in knowing self for career development. And many people haven't simply owned that they need to do that or how to get there. All that said, work and our identity are important in our country. We know that work satisfaction or dissatisfaction has important health effects in us. All right, let me just finish up here. Career practitioners meet our clients at the intersection of what has been and what might be in their lives. And what on the surface can seem very straightforward, do I want this job? Do I want that job? Is actually a process that can feel overwhelming, frustrated, and complicated to us. So what is our career then? For me, it's that common thread throughout our lives of how we use our skills and talents. And to take you back to another way of thinking about it, careers are our manifestations of our attempts at making sense of our life experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. That was quite insightful. Any questions for Connie before we move to the next speaker? If not, then Darryll, you're up.
Thank you, Gary. So my name is Darryll Pines. I'm the Dean of the A. James Clark School of Engineering at the University of Maryland, just right down the street from you guys here, about 8 miles away. It's a land-grant institution, like many state schools in the United States, has a population of 38,000 students, and my college has a total population enrollment of about 6,500 students, of which 4,500 are undergraduates and 2,000 are graduate students. So a standard state school. We happen to sit in the National Capital Region, the federal region we like to call it. We're the largest land-grant institution within the Beltway and external to the Beltway within the Northern Virginia, Maryland, D.C. region. And because of that, as you might tell, our workforce needs are to support this population and the number of employers in this region. So as I prepared for this workshop and this session, I analyzed our data over the last 5 to 10 years, and I found it striking in several respects. I deal primarily, as my colleagues on my right and left, deal with 17-year-olds to 35-year-olds who are in our universities, to be honest with you, right? Those are the undergraduates and the graduate students who populate our engineering programs. And we often deal with a few others who are a little bit older than that, who are doing adult education or advanced engineering education, but primarily it's that other population group that fits into that one category that you showed, Connie. And this group of students, I was just looking at our numbers, our placement, we graduate about 1,400 students annually, of which about 900 of those are undergrads and about 300 of those are professional master's students and about 150 are PhD students. And for the undergrads, it's 85% placement at graduation. And then some students trickle into the summer, and by the end of the summer, we're probably at 92% placement of undergraduates in either graduate school or in a professional job in the workforce. And then I looked at our students. Our incoming students are about 65, 70% from state of Maryland, and the other ones are 30% either international or outside the state. And so most of our students kind of want to stay in the region because they grew up in the region. And our placement is something like 65% of our students from College Park stay within the Maryland, Virginia, DC region, because there's a lot of jobs here, first of all, in the government sector and other sectors. And then about 35% are national. They go to California, they go to Google, Microsoft, Boeing, and New York, and Texas, and Florida, typical places of where they go in the region. What we're seeing, though, is very interesting dynamic. Over the last decade, what we are seeing is that a lot of our number one employers, which is really shocking. In this region, it used to be the big aerospace and defense contractors. You know who they are, so I won't mention their names. I mentioned one already, Boeing. Well, I'll throw the other two in there, Northrop Grumman and Lockheed. Now they're all represented fairly. And what has happened is kind of fascinating, is that they've been outdone over the last 5 years, at least in our region, by the consulting firms, technical services firms, and you know who they are, the big ones. Booz Allen, Accenture. They are in our top, those two are in our top 5 employers. It's actually unbelievable because they were not even in the top 10 just a decade ago. So what has happened is the push towards the soft skills and the problem solving, the analytical skills that the engineering programs across the nation are producing these kinds of individuals, and also the word of mouth through our student pool and the opportunities they were given in these particular technical services firms is enticing to our students. And therefore, and they go there readily, and they get paid nice salaries. I always like to say, engineers immediately become middle class upon graduation, immediately. And some of them become upper middle class, but very few. And some of them become really wealthy in a couple of years if they have a great idea and they're entrepreneurs. So engineering is a great profession in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased, I'm an engineer. And I'm an aerospace engineer, and Boeing hires a lot of aerospace engineers, and we love Boeing. And so, so I think that it's a great profession, and our students, in all the United States, the number of engineering programs and their enrollments have increased exponentially. I'm sure you know that. I'm sure you've seen all of that data. My colleagues, Georgia Tech, George Washington, they've seen that. We've seen it. I mean, when I first started at Dean was 2009. We had only 2,800 undergrads. Today we have 4,200 undergrads in the total program. I mean, it's an enormous increase. I'm sure the same is true for my colleagues. But these students are getting placed even in this recession economy, which is fascinating. The kids that are getting in place are definitely the science and engineering students. So we're not having a problem there. But what we do see is this convergence towards technical services and consulting firms, and that's unique. We also see an emergence of this generation, at least the younger group between 17 to 26, is very, very socially conscious. So a few of them want to go work for not-for-profits. They want to go overseas. So one of the other talents or skill sets that we're trying to give them is sort of cultural experiences in country. Those countries include China, India, Korea, other countries. They just have that commitment to want to do good by society, and they want to use their engineering skills to do it. So what we end up doing, we have now a number of international programs that we didn't have, I would say 5 years ago, that are either short-term in-country experiences, language training, and just general cultural experiences and cultural exchanges so that they can go and work in China even though they don't speak the language extremely well. So that's something that our engineering programs have adapted to. In terms of the sectors, so just broadly speaking, we see students going in IT, defense, space, telecommunications, manufacturing, and in our state, we have a couple of large construction firms, environmental, which is sort of speaking towards the issues of socially being responsible, still energy and gas, even though we're not in Texas, as David mentioned. A lot of our chemical engineers go to ExxonMobil in Texas. They're starting to go to the Pennsylvania firms that are ExxonMobil being based in Pennsylvania for the fracking. Supply chain, product design, and of course in the state of Maryland, we're very well known for biotechnology and biosciences, so we have a large pool in our biomedical department into that domain. And then I want to just add a couple more things before I turn it over to my colleague. The largest change, again, has been this movement from aerospace and defense, and part of it's just really one of the key factors is sequestration. DoD budgets being reduced in this region, definitely in this region as it affects the large aerospace and defense contractors. The students see that. They understand that. It's word of mouth. They see the employer demographics change just a little bit. So they respond to that. And so we cannot just think that it's not federally related. It is related to the federal, sort of stalling of the budgets situation, which probably will continue. So they adapt. Now, in the commercial sector, we see, like all of you see, is, our students, our computer science students are going to the Googles, to the Microsofts, to the Amazons on the West Coast. And that's because that's where great opportunities are, and not that they're not here as well, but they also go over there geographically. And then I wanted to add a couple more comments about how the career services has changed. And, we've seen the online, which all of you have seen, just really exponentially increase. So I think the employers save a lot of money with the online approach and not having to come to as many career services. We see a lot of work related to online interviews. We used to be mostly on-campus interviews, and a lot of these things are mostly online and networking and using social media, which is a bigger thing going on today. With that said, I'll stop there. But I think I would say the climate is excellent for engineers, in my opinion. Even though we've had this recession, we're not seeing much of a drop-off in employment for our students. I would say the only difference is they're not getting 4 or 5 job offers; they're getting 1 or 2. Thank you.
Thanks, Darryll. For the record, at Georgia Tech, we also love Boeing, Lockheed, and Northrop Grumman, as well as IBM, GE, and BP for my fellow committee members. Any questions for Darryll? One back here. Please tell us who you are.
MIT. Question for Darryll, yeah. Do students get any academic credit, either hard or soft, when they go abroad?
For the short-term experiences, no. We do a couple of 2-week experiences in country, and there's more just cultural exposure to opportunities, but they get no credit for that. It's sort of a side program. But obviously for study abroad, they get credit. For some of the research experiences, they get credit. For some of the internship experience, they get credit. Yeah.
Any others for Darryll? Alex?
Address for the University of Maryland in particular, if you have any specific soft skill courses that you require or at least offer to your engineering students?
Yeah, I'm sure this is true at Georgia Tech and at George Washington. Immediately when our kids come in as freshmen, we put them into Introduction to Engineering Design, and as part of that, we are developing those soft skills, communication skills, written skills. They do it as part of a design team, entry-level design team, and many of them, are obviously novices, apprentice, what we call apprentice engineers, not really good at the soft skills and not very good at the hard skills either, for that matter. And so what we try to do is educate them, and because when they exit our place, we want them to be good engineers. We want them to stand up in front of an audience, be able to give a wonderful technical talk, and make it very succinct and concise, and deliver a message. And so that's part of our experiences now. I think that's true across the engineering profession in education.
Okay, I think we'll move on, turn it over to Michael.
Well, thank you for having me here for the panel. And I'm going to start with a question of the crowd. How many of you went to a career office or a career advisor when you were on your campus? A couple? Very good. What do you think the general impression is of career offices and career advisors on campus? See some thumbs down. Yeah, about 2 years ago, I fled that environment. I was working at Johns Hopkins University, working in career office, and enjoying my work, and luckily my wife was with the State Department, and she got a posting abroad in Baku, Azerbaijan, of all places, and unless you know Iran, Russia, and oil and gas, you may not know where Azerbaijan may be. But I went away from it because it's a difficult job. It is. It's challenging, especially with the placement word and students coming in, and there's a lot of pressure now. We talk about parents. Parents are very involved. Huge investments in education. It's a hard job. But alas, when I went to Baku, I didn't get away from education and training. I worked for an organization called, well, it was their diplomatic corps, but they'd changed it to a university, ADA University. And as part of that, I worked in their executive education and worked with many engineers at BP. I did some work with another company, went to Oxy and UAE to do some work with them. And soft skills were a key part of that. Internationalization with the people that I met that were abroad and understanding how to work in cross-functional international teams were important. And so our post is up, and luckily my wife saw this job at GW. And position, I got very excited about it because the approach that we're taking with career services at GW is very different. It comes from resources being put into that, those services, increasing our staffing. But most importantly, they've been looking to integrate career services across the campus. Because I'll tell you, one thing on the employer side, they might go to the engineering schools if they want engineers, and they might go here, but they actually want all your students. They look to come to one door. They want to walk in a door. The students may come in through a bunch of different doors in order to get to that employer, but they want people from our political science, our history, or whatever it is that they can do the jobs, because they really want those diversified skills and the technical skills as well. In looking at career services today and how it's changed a bit, now that doesn't change with when you sit down and talk to a professor, you sit down and talk to a career coach, you sit down and talk to the parents and the students. We all want the same outcome. We want not just that first job, actually. Many people are looking at, we want people to be successful in our corporations and successful in their careers. And I think that's an approach we're taking differently. We're looking long-term of developing skills, not only that they'll apply in that first job, but they take them 5 years out and they continue to process. Now, some are technical knowledge and skills that they're going to have, but for us, it's those soft skills they're going to continue to employ, but also those HR career development skills. Not only how to get the job, but how do you work with your boss and negotiate that stretch job? How do you negotiate that international experience? So we're really working on a lot of skills so they think long-term about their career. The environment is a little bit different, too, from when I was in school in the sense of millennials. There are things we're all looking at careers differently, but millennials are different. Things are changing. You don't have security of a job, but actually, a lot of millennials are kind of okay with that shifting and moving. The average time that they're in a job is 2.5 years. So the pressure is on us. We know they're not going to stay with that employer. There's a risk there. We're giving a product, but they're going to be gone potentially in a very short amount of time. Ideally, working internally as well. But with that, we have a different approach in which we're, again, thinking about that career path and where it leads them. The other thing is, again, I'll go back to cost. And right now in the news, if anyone's following, was standing there talking to colleagues and looked over at the TV, and you see that big headline is the cost of education too much. Is it worth it? Is really what the headline was on CNN. Now, I know that doesn't always apply to engineering where the jobs are a bit more plentiful, but those questions are there and the outcomes are incredibly important to us. And the parents know that. So as I've stepped into that, 3 things that I saw at GW that I think are important that I like, and I'm talking in a broad scope, is an integrated, seamless process. And how do you create that is through collaboration. Meaning we need to collaborate. So we do have school-specific career offices that primarily in the engineering side serve the master's level students. However, in our office, we have 2 types of coaches that work across all the schools. One is career exploration coach, and that is just helping people figure out exactly what they want to do through assessments, whether it's MBTI, strong inventory, charting out those experiences both on campus and off campus in which they can explore their strengths and challenge themselves a little bit. As they progress to that and they start to research and understand more of what they want to do, we progress to industry coaches. And with the industry coaches, they have much more of a specialization. So we have a specific coach with a long background. I tried to get her to come and join me with this STEM, working specifically with STEM students. But that's not just the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, that's in the math, the economics, wherever it is, whoever's moving into that field, she works with them. We have a business coach that works specifically with people wanting to go into business. So the technical aspects of the consulting interview, someone's prepared to talk them through the process, but also think broadly about what that looks like. So reapproaching the way we've structured our career services to bring all students to do that. We also have a council that brings in all those directors of those different schools to talk about how we deal with resources and how we deal with issues. For example, recently we had an audience with the provost, which is you don't always get as a career, as career directors, because he pulled together this council where we meet. And one of the things was talking about international students and the growth of international students and what do we do about getting them jobs. That simple approach of all of us coming together with the other schools to be able to say, yeah, engineering, business, everywhere, we've got to deal with international students and how they're going to go about their job search, not always in the U.S., but abroad. So some of those changing aspects. The other thing I want to go now more specifically to the engineering side, and this came out of a meeting with Facebook. First off, Facebook came to our campus. We were surprised, it's like, well, good campus, but they picked out very specific schools. Why? Because we focus very much on women. Over 40% of those in the engineering program are women, and they want diversity with the employers. And there was a specific approach by the school to diversify that, and now that's having an impact with the employers. They want to be there for that. But in that meeting, in addition to them getting there in the first place, is to say, okay, when should we engage? And I think you probably have already discussed this early. Unlike a lot of liberal arts schools where people are figuring out in the door freshmen, the fact that you have programs where they start with soft skills early and immediately, they start building a group in which they'll learn with as colleagues, as far as fellow students and from their professors, and it progresses along. The other thing is, I think a lot of the schools in that early warning, there's still the time of having early warning indicators, meaning working with the academic advisors is key. When a student is struggling, we work closely to know that they can come back over to the career office to look at some of those career assessments. However, in that, we still struggle with finding time in the curriculum. When can we step in? Because we feel ourselves, we are good at helping develop those soft skills, understanding teamwork, running an MBTI workshop, and then having them work on a project and coming back to them later and helping them process the struggles that they might face. So we're looking at ways in which to get into the classroom, share the curriculum with the professors, and really partner again, collaborate on the engineering from the freshman year to the senior. And you won't always find that at some other areas. Also, we've looked at, because of that tension of look at more flipped classroom designs and how we may provide more online content and then engage in the group discussion so they're actually doing some of the things that they're working on. The second point would be better understanding of some of the employment trends. I think you've covered a lot of those beautifully, as students are looking very broadly about where they want to leverage their skills and that movement, which is important. But hiring is still very local, I think. So for us right now, and was listening just to the radio the other day of how this is really a growing bed for entrepreneurial startups and being able to take advantage of that. And students see that, but there's tons of opportunities. And the nice thing with the number of internships here, if you're not in DC area, coming to those beds and looking for the future of where those employers are growing is important. The last is understanding changes in employer engagement. And one, it isn't just coming on campus, it is online, but they want to be engaged in the classroom. What we've been hearing over and over again from employers is if we can get in the classroom, either through alumni, work with mentoring, seeing them to work in the projects, that's going to tell us who the shining talent is, but also will help see how they can mentor and grow. How those students are learning now is critical for employers because they don't want to lose them. They don't want to invest money in and lose them, so they want to be engaged. So again, going back, there's some changes. Collaboration is key if you can do that. Looking at some of the changes within your environment and be able to leverage that, and then really paying attention to employers and different ways in which they want to actually engage students, not just the fair, not just employer presentations.
Thank you. Questions for Michael?
There's wine waiting.
And if there,
I know where I'm at.
yeah, Sherry.
Seeing a shift in how students are presenting themselves, you know, that is the resume dead? Is the portfolio alive? And, you know, is it something other than your GPA that matters in thinking about, talking about what you're passionate about and what you can do?
Yes, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the monster. That it's really, you can have a portfolio, but I see very successful students are very adept at building not just their resume on LinkedIn, but really putting their work out there. We are exploring ePortfolio, where people can put more of their work, reflective work on there, on ePortfolio, and be able to integrate that into LinkedIn. So I say that that is one. I do think that students being able to present, but being able to pitch themselves is key. We're working more on not just pitch, the elevator pitch, but it really does go back to those values and trying to making sure they're not just saying I want to work here because I want to work here, but employers also see that genuine approach of how they go out there. We are, right now, I thought it was fascinating. I met with a gentleman that runs one of the top business competitions in the U.S., GW's business competition. He said the best teams are not all MBAs, actually. They're some of the worst teams, sorry, MBAs. It's actually integrated teams where you get an engineer, you get you know, business student, and maybe someone that has a communications background. So those are the types of things in you know, their profiles that employers are starting to see, and they're trying to build those cross-functional teams that I think are really positive for them.
Okay, excellent. Let's go to the audience. We have a question to my right.
Hi, actually, this is more, maybe more of a comment.
Tell us who you are.
Oh, my name is Lynn Epps. I'm Associate Director for Employer Relations with the University of Delaware Career Services Center. And it's interesting, as you know, there's probably several universities here. There's probably a different model for career services for as many universities that are represented. But it sounds like there's a huge opportunity out of this conversation, and when we speak about career readiness and those soft skills. I'm also on the board of the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and we're in the process now of discussing what are those core competencies that students need. So when we think about engineering, this is a huge opportunity to maybe collaborate and begin to, as we identify what are those core competencies, the soft skills that are needed, and work with those with NCDA as well as NACE to really inform. You know, NACE has over 1,800 colleges that are part of that organization. So there's a way, I think, to really inform the career services professionals and continue the collaboration between faculty, career services, and employers.
Thank you. All right. Sir.
Hi, I'm Tom Rudin. I'm with the National Academies. This is a question for Dean May and Dean Pines. The speaker from Boeing, Diane, I believe, spoke earlier about one of the challenges she faces is that they don't even know what some of the jobs of the future are going to be, even a few years down the road. Can't define them, don't know what they'll involve. What challenge does that present for you then with your curriculum, with your programs, not even knowing what some of the jobs of the future will be?
So one answer is to sort of inculcating the students an appreciation for lifelong learning, and to make available to our graduates at some reasonable rate the access to our professional education programs throughout their career, because the profession is going to change, and it's changing more and more rapidly. So recognizing that and encouraging students to make avail themselves of these mechanisms to keep themselves fresh is one answer. Darryll may have others.
And I think, you know, Mike or Connie said this, that, you know, our students know that they're rotating fairly quickly in the job world. So they're adapting already. And, you know, Dr. May is absolutely correct that, you know, we're all of us in engineering, at least from professional education, we are preparing to have lifelong learners. And so we are providing them services over a long career and at a discount so that they can still be connected to our universities in the long term. But I think the core thing that we do, and that's why the wonderful thing about the engineering profession is that they're problem solvers. They're analytical already. They've been working on problems constantly. So the ability to adapt is quicker than maybe other professions. And that's why engineers go into all professions. I mean, 50% of the engineers who graduate in the United States do not go into engineering. They go somewhere else, and they're successful. 20% of the CEOs, their first degree, Fortune 500 CEOs, is an engineering degree. You can go check the record. That's absolutely true. So it's brought them those sort of analytical skills, those problem-solving skills to be adapted to the market, and they're able to learn the business skills as well. So I think we're lucky in this profession that the way it's founded and the way it's based and the way that we bring students up, and we're always adapting, we're always trying to improve our curriculum. That's what ABET is all about. But we're making them lifelong learners, so I think they're adapting fairly quickly.
Kitty.
I have a follow-up question. I'm curious because I think you're absolutely right that they're adapting, but I also think, particularly with the millennials, they have very strong opinions about culture and hierarchy. And my son just graduated last year from UVA, and his best friend turned down, not to be mentioned, company in this room, much to his parents' chagrin, because he saw it as too hierarchical and too really old school. And it's a very interesting conversation where they really are having this sense and maybe delusional, but some of these consulting services, no, I'm serious, these consulting services have made it seem, because of the genes, because of the lack of ties, because they have pizza on Friday and they go all have beer, there's a different culture that they're looking for that I'm still surprised a lot of engineering firms haven't picked up on. So I'm curious, there is the lifelong learning, but then there's also that cultural aspect that in terms of what they expect, going back to the comment about teamwork and collaboration. So I'm wondering, to what extent we're going to see some of that adaptation in terms of how students are approached.
I'm the proud owner of 2 millennials, but I'm not going to answer that question. I'll let someone else try it.
This is interesting because I think about when Facebook, again, sorry to bring them back again, but that's the name they see, and they're like the movie, and they're like, oh, well, it was a little bit accurate. There's some things about working at Facebook are great, and students, they would love that. There's a lot of people I know who wanted to continue college past college, at least that environment. And that comes back to a career skill and coaching that really matters, of talking someone through multiple options and understanding not just past their nose in that first job, but where is it taking them. The other thing is that it's great that students get the jobs into those, into the top firms, and the student will hear, oh, this student got it. A lot of those students work very hard. And so they'll put their eggs in a basket. I want to go to this major firm, but it doesn't always work that way. People and they get down to the end, and it's gone. And so part of career planning is not having a plan A, it's having a plan B, C, and I just read something else on a plan D is important. The thing you never thought about. And that comes back to lifelong learning is about, you can understand problem solving, but unless you can translate that into other businesses and other languages, you're going to have a harder time. So cross-functional teams in an academic environment, I think, are extremely important. But also a big part, I think I like to do is storytelling and teaching students how in an interview it's about storytelling and understanding your audience. Engineering talk to transferring that to business talk, and being able, if students gain that skill, being able to translate the problem in their skills to multiple, then that's golden.
I also want to add, for most of us in this room, looking around, when we did career assessment, it was interest, period. And probably within, maybe the last 10 years, we have begun to integrate values into that assessment discussion, which is important not only for young folks, but also for those midlife people who are looking at, what am I doing now? Or that 40-year-old who says, I need to change my life. So that's become more important. It's been a theory growth in career, but it's also been applied and ongoing.
Other questions from our audience?
Coralie Brierly, and I'm the Vice President of the National Academy of Engineering. I have a question about what engineering schools might be doing in terms of training the engineering student to be entrepreneurial. Because so much of the new technology happens not in a single disciplinary area, but it happens on the interfaces between the most disparate of subjects. So could you address that topic, please?
Sure. So I think the concept of innovation and entrepreneurship around the nation has been extremely positively embraced at most of the engineering colleges, and either in collaboration with business schools or just strictly within the engineering school. So at Maryland, we have programs at the freshman level. You can actually come in and choose a minor in entrepreneurship immediately. You could be part of an honors program, which is on innovation and entrepreneurship in the first 2 years, and be immersed with a community of people who think like you, who want to be entrepreneurs, are not just from engineering. They could be from engineering, science, the business school, arts and humanities, social sciences, and they all are convened in a single dormitory. And then in the senior and junior year, and the junior and senior year, also there's programs for students who want to learn about entrepreneurship. And then, like most schools, we also have student-run incubators and larger incubators. And so, and I think it's just a climate of part of the focus of universities now, because of their land-grant mission. It's adapting to also address the economic needs of the state. And that's been pushed upon us by the state, but also something we've adapted to anyway. And fortunately for engineering, many of the engineers go off and become great entrepreneurs. And so I think it's a culture that's been embraced. I think you'll see it across almost every campus in one way or another, some more prolific than others, but it's definitely been embraced.
Similarly, we've been developing this whole notion of what we call entrepreneurial confidence, and we want all of our students to have such confidence, engineering students, when they graduate. There's a lot of components to that, but the general paradigm is something we're calling learn, make, launch. So there's coursework, there's learning, there's making things, there's prototyping in facilities like what we call our invention studio, where there's 3D printers and water jet cutters and woodworking and metalworking and CAD tools, et cetera. Skunk works, if you will, for the students to access to make their projects for classes, for competitions, or just because. And then launch. We have an incubator. We have a venture capital matchmaking organization. We have all sorts of, we have a startup accelerator program that allows our students to get involved into starting companies. The vision is ultimately we may have as many as 100 student startups a year. Many will fail. That's fine. We want the students to get that experience, learn quickly, learn to fail, and recover from that quickly, and use those skills. They may not start their own companies, but they may have use for those skills as they go to a big company.
In general, you hit on a key thing, and that is failure. Too many in the millennial have not dealt with failure enough. They've gotten their sixth-place ribbon for everything. And entrepreneurs they fail over and over again. And then the pitch, being able to pitch an idea is something I know the gentleman I was meeting with, he said that's where it really comes down to, those two skills.
Sherry Shepard, just to talk a little bit about that, because Maryland and Georgia Tech have wonderful programs in entrepreneurship, and there's a national center, and Donna Riley is actually the program director of Epicenter, which is asking the question is, what is the role of entrepreneurship and innovation in the education of all engineers, so that in fact we can move engineers from being problem solvers to actually be helping frame the problem to begin with. My question, though, was, one of my sources of pride in being an engineer is it really does represent a path to a different economic status. So socioeconomic status and being a blue-collar profession, that was a phrase that was used many, many years ago. But I heard a story a couple of weeks ago that bothered me, and it was about internships and engineering companies offering unpaid internships. And it was putting students, particularly who needed to work in the summer and make money to stay in school, at a major disadvantage in terms of employment. And is this just a really weird story, or is it more common than we realize?
So it's been happening in the other disciplines for years. Unpaid, especially in this region, in political science and government and politics and economics, nothing but unpaid internships in this region, right? I'm just being honest with you. So it's not anything that's new in the general population. It's just new to engineering in the last 5 years, where corporations, for whatever reasons, have decided to really kind of test students and not pay them, right? So we don't like it either. We do see it. It's not a huge trend. Let me just clarify. It's not a huge trend in engineering, but we see a little bit of it. But on a more positive note, what we also see with some of our employers is that they're looking to hire teams of students now more than ever. Groups of 4 or 5 interns to come in for the summer or even during the academic year and in a co-op experience to work on a challenging group of problems, work together as a team, see how it evolves, and be in the critical path of some really new concept. And I think that's a new partnership we've seen. We haven't seen that within, I would say a decade ago, but we see it now within the last 3 or 4 years. So, but this trend, I think, is a small trend. We don't see it that much at Maryland. I know how Gary sees it at Georgia Tech. Okay.
I believe that labor laws say that they're supposed to pay unless it's connected to an education they can volunteer or is somehow linked to education. So that goes back to when you have those internship programs where they're getting credit, to be careful to be asking about that and pushing back a little bit with the employer to say, come on. Because there are ways that people work around the law, I know. But yeah, DC, a lot of unpaid.
Other questions? We're getting close to time. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Samantha Brunhaver, Arizona State. So at my institution and others, there's an increasing number of students, engineering students, enrolling in online degree programs, both at the bachelor's level and the master's level. And there's been a lot of thinking now about how do we replicate the higher education experience for these individuals. But it strikes me that particularly with career services, it's often housed in a center that you go to when you need help. And I wonder, for these online students who can't necessarily avail themselves of this physical thing, you might not have had to think about this, but do you have any thoughts or recommendations about how we can scale the existing career services for engineering students to these online students as well?
Actually, the vast majority of a portion of career services is delivered online or remotely nowadays in almost every sector. Higher education, not K through 12, but higher education, most certainly outplacement, almost a lot of corporate work is delivered in that way now. Some of it is even the coaching that is done remotely. But you guys can speak to higher ed.
And we are finding more of that where we're trying to focus on this as one of the initiatives that we're looking at is the online population. Number one, are they doing it because they're actually looking for a job? So identifying how they want to use our services. Are they really looking for a job or just looking to scale up in their own career? So all of our coaches do offer online sessions through Skype or Google, so we're familiar with that. The other thing, though, there is a component where we're looking more at when there are alumni meetings or creating gatherings for people within geographic regions if they're online. Because you still want to build, on one side, an affinity with the university or with your actual academic program. So I think it is important to be thinking about when you have events located, alumni events, bringing career staff in or people that understand the services that are there and can kind of touch, more of the group events so that they feel there's that opportunity. The third thing is, again, creating more online access to the panels and presentations and employer events, I think, is key. You do find when you record it, not as many people were looking at it, so we're trying to get better with that. However, the live events, you'll have people will go in. Our alumni office has monthly networking sessions that people from all over the world join, students and alumni. So you've got to leverage the technology. And our coaches go to the schools. They don't expect them all to come to our offices. We try to build the relationship by going to the classroom, the school, and then the students feel more comfortable with that one-on-one session as they sit down.
We'll just take the last two questions from the two folks that are standing, and we'll conclude.
Alan Zimmerman with Northrop. It's interesting listening to this panel because it's been making me look back and think about my undergraduate education down at UVA. And, I was fortunate. I did some really interesting things in collaboration between departments and that. but that was self-driven by me. And you've mentioned a couple of programs that University of Maryland's doing. My question is, what's changed in how we make students aware that they can be creative? You know, for example, like my undergraduate thesis was a collaboration between the drama department and the engineering school. We designed a new control board for their theater. But I think it was the only one who didn't just go sit on some professor's research team and be slave labor as an undergrad to get their undergraduate thesis done. What's changed in how we educate students that they not just have the flexibility, but that's encouraged and a trait that employers are going to be looking at down the road that will differentiate themselves from the average student?
So I think, you know, in most of our engineering programs, I'm sure this is very true at Georgia Tech and George Washington and Virginia Tech, is that we are engaging these students. They're very smart students, right? When these 17, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds come to our colleges, they're academically extremely bright. But I still would say about, at least in our college, about 1/3 have never touched a single thing and built a single thing, right? Not even picked up a screwdriver. So we engage them immediately in the habits of mind of engineering and the creative side of engineering by forcing them to design something, forcing them to build something, forcing them to compete something in a competition at the end of the semester or the fall semester. And you know what happens? 2/3 of those systems don't work. But failure is important. Because what do we do as engineers? We learn from our failures. We learn from our you know, sort of limited skills that we have at that early stage in being apprentice engineers. But it doesn't cause the students to give up. In fact, it intrigues them even more. And it creates a creative spirit early on. And that's what's changed between your education and my education and what we're doing with these kids today. And one of the other things that has changed, probably when you were a student and when I was a student and when Gary was a student, is that 1/4 of the students did not graduate in engineering from the freshmen that came in. That is no longer true. We can't afford in this nation to lose a single student to the best of our ability. So what you see now in all of the engineering programs is a commitment to retention and graduation rates, unlike ever before. So that means multiple levels of engagement throughout the entire integrated curriculum in every way. Thank God for the maker community coming online. Thank God for that. It's such a creative domain. Georgia Tech has the invention studios. We have maker labs ourselves, and it immediately engages those students who've never made anything. They now believe that they can make something, easily, in fact. Thank God to CAD as well. And so this has been great for engineering, and it's even improved the retention rate, I think, over time. So I think the difference is the engagement early on in the principle and habits of mind of engineering, and sort of what I call the hands-on learning environment, constantly engaged, constantly. And that's different than, say, an individual just doing it on his or her own. Thank you.
That was a great answer. I can only add that we're attempting to make some more room in the curriculum for minors and certificate programs outside of the major, and also having multidisciplinary teams doing senior design. Those are things that are happening now that didn't happen before. Last question.
Yeah, Emily Allen from Cal State Los Angeles. First, a quick comment about Sherry's question about unpaid internships. I'm a new dean, and when I got there, I heard about an unpaid internship program at one of the aerospace companies represented here, and I was shocked. I was shocked that our low-income students were being exploited in this unpaid internship program. But then after I talked to the students who'd been in it and found out most of them had gone on to get paid internships the next summer and eventually hired by the company, and I realized many of these students, most of these students, had never met anyone who worked at a big company, had never been to a big company, didn't know what the company did, and in fact were kind of at the point that a lot of high schoolers are at from more affluent communities. And so I think there is a place for these. Obviously, you have to give credit for them and stuff. But so anyway, that's just a plug for our other major percentage of engineering students who are actually underrepresented minorities and low income and first generation. So my question then has to do with how can these students tell their story, which is often full of, hard work, incredible commitment, loyalty, plus they've learned all their engineering skills, but their resumes may not look as packed, but they have a huge huge, personal skills to bring to the workplace. And when I speak with our alums and find out what they've done and who they've become, and when I talk to the companies that hire them, they're very valued. But how do they tell their story? Because I don't think we're telling the story of all of our students here. Maybe a different way to put that is, how are their qualities valued, and how can they illustrate them?
I'll jump into that in the sense that we often make too many assumptions, even in career offices, that they've been through it, they've seen it, they should know this, and sometimes being able to know that background, and that's sharing information often across the university is important, and to know that profile of student. That's why the special populations, you don't announce it all the time, but that sometimes takes a little bit extra work. If you're first generation, what should I be doing? There's so many things that they could even be overwhelmed with. So it's extra resources and guidance at time, and being able to identify them and being able to step in to add a little bit more background knowledge as they come to it. The other thing is they can't be afraid of telling that story. I mean, employer, it's compelling. It's not the same thing that every other student. I volunteered here, I did this. I worked hard to get here, and people respect that. That shows there's a term in higher ed now of grit. Do people have grit? Well, and it is true grit, and you see it in the students.
In the South, we eat grits. So I'm going to conclude there. Thanks for your attention. I want to thank our panelists, if you will, with me.